marketing services. We are right back at content creation today, and I wanted to take you guys through just a really quick session on Power Query and some of the what I'd like to call tips and tricks and things you can do inside of Power Query, some of which you may be very familiar with, but I thought let's go through it. So in this session, we are going to use the AdventureWorks dataset for the most part. So I just went out here and Googled AdventureWorks CSV files. I'm going to use the file options here. I went out to GitHub. When you're in GitHub, you are going to be able to see a slew of inputs here. And those are the ones I'm actually going to use for this content. So let's go out to Power BI Desktop. The very first step I'm going to perform here is to go out and find these CSV files that I have downloaded or will download if they do not display, and they do not. So let me go ahead and quickly download these files and get them loaded. Let's see if that file downloaded. I can't really tell if it did. Okay, they're loading. Perfect. Just not giving me the quick header for it. All right, so we've downloaded these files respectfully, and let's go out here now and get to the CSV options for it. I'm gonna grab this. I'm gonna grab the customer table to start, and then we'll grab just one additional table in conjunction with that. So for folks who are going out here, I kind of moved through that really fast. So let me just go back. The very first step I'm doing here is just getting data. This is a CSV file. I could tell that from the download format. I'm going to grab the customer table first, and it's going to just give us a quick preview of what this data looks like, right? So customer ID, first, last name, and full name. So we'll go to transform data because in this case, I'm going to actually take this into Power Query, which is where we're going to spend the majority of our time here during the session. And I'm going to go ahead and grab one or two more of these CSV files. Let's grab the orders table, for example. Again, gives you a quick preview based on the first 200 rows of data. We'll grab that one. I'm just going to get rid of the one and just call it the orders table. And then let's get one more. Let's get the employee table. All right. So this is generally one of the very first steps that you're going to perform as you're getting into Power Query. It's getting your data. I mean, it's the most simplistic step, but it's a step that you'll have to do first. And the first thing you're going to notice inside of Power Query is over to the far right, which is where I spend quite a bit of time when I'm in Power Query. You're going to see your applied steps. So as you grab these files, it's going to automatically create essentially these applied steps for you. Now, the system is fairly smart, probably extremely smart, and so it recognizes certain steps for you. So let's take a look at the steps on the far right-hand side. We see applied. In the applied steps, we see a source, which is basically encode that's just used to pull or grab this data and from what location, right? So this is on my downloads, in my downloads folder, and it's basically doing some of the text to delimiter attributes that you typically see. It's telling you the number of columns here, encoding, and then just some additional context here. But this is basically a default setting. One thing I will say here is that if additional columns were to be added into this file and you don't see them, if you change this to 5, 6, or 7, for example, if you added a column 5 here, you change that to 5, it'll dynamically pull in that record for you. It also recognizes that the first row is probably not accurate. Again, the system's pretty smart. And so it's going to say, okay, I don't think these are the actual column names. We're going to go ahead and promote headers dynamically here so that you can actually see the actual column headers for each of these columns. And the system will dynamically change any data types that it feels might be inaccurately set up. So you'll see here, customer ID automatically is turned into a numerical value because every single value is numeric. First and last name and full name are all text fields. And so you'll be able to see that in your encode as well. If we go to the orders table, you're going to see a very similar structure here in that you're going to see the source, you're going to see the promoted headers, and you're going to see the changed type input. And same for employees, right? So nothing super crazy going on here. Pretty straightforward. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at some of the things that might be relevant or helpful for you as you were viewing data inside of Power Query. The very first one that you might want to look at in every case is the column quality. So it's basically giving you what Power BI believes to be the quality of this data in this particular column. So if you look at sales order ID, it's looking at 1,000 rows of data. And essentially it's showing that every single order ID is valid. There's no errors in this data, and it's fully input. So there's no errors and there's no empty records. Every single record has an ID numerical value associated with it. There are no blanks or nulls. Let's go ahead and take a quick preview through this entire data set and see if there are any that may not have an input. All right, go figure. We got a super clean data set. This is not the normal standard. Every once in a while, you are going to see that your data might have empty values or errors in some cases, specifically when let's just say Power BI has recognized this to be a numerical value, but one of the 1,000 records here, for example, has a alphabet character in it. And so it'll show you that one record is an error. And generally, if you see something like that where 1% is showing that way, it probably is an error. And the system's pretty smart, and it will give you the ability to kind of fix those errors in some capacity. So there will be some notifications that may pop up here in this corner. So let's move down here to employee, and let's really quickly make a change in the employee data set. All right, so let's go and grab the employee data set here, and let's go ahead and just where these nulls are, I'm actually going to replace these values with nothing. So I'm going to empty these values out so that we actually have a true use case in which we have null records or empty records in our data set, just so we can see kind of what those look like and what are some of the actions we can take in those instances. So let's go ahead and clear these out. Save. We'll close out of this file now. We'll go back into this file. We'll hit refresh preview because we basically made changes to the employee file. And as you can see immediately on that refresh, you'll see that we do have some null values that display now inside of our data set. All right, perfect. And you can also see that our preview is now updated where we can see empty values as an example. So here you'll notice that we've got something that says, do you want to remove these empty values, right? So this manager ID field has 88% valid records and 2% empty. There's 15 records, 12% of those, or 2 records, are empty. And what do you want to do with it? There's various things you can do in these instances. I missed a null right here. You can just simply do what we're going to do here, which is basically input those null values, input these blank values as null. So we can go here, we can say replace values. We're going to say where these null records are, these blank records. Right now they're blank. There's nothing there at all. We're going to say replace it with the words null. So we'll have records that look very similar to what we saw on the top. So then we go from 88% valid and 12% empty to 100% valid, 0% empty, which is generally what you want to be able to see inside of your environment. So let's continue on. All right, same for territory. We see that there are some blank values here. You could decide that maybe if the territory is blank, because this input, for some reason, maybe you just know that the input's blank, you might want to remove the empty values here. When you do that, it's basically going to filter out any record that would have displayed when this value wasn't, that would have displayed. So basically, let me go back and show you. Right now, it's basically removing those null records. Let's just clear this out. And so it will take away the entire first row as an example. So if you hover over the numerical value, you can see what's displayed there. But basically this entire record would be empty. And so because of it would be removed because the territory is blank or no values there. It's just empty. So you can basically do that if you want, remove the empty values, or you could say, okay, it's all right, the territory is missing, country, and the group, those aren't super relevant, so we're going to keep those records in. Definitely something that you can do as well. Just a really quick tip here, you can actually grab multiple records here, so you can control, I'm using a MacBook here in this case, but the short key to grab multiple records inside of here, just like you would do inside of Excel. You can grab multiple columns, and then we're going to say, okay, hey, I want to replace the values in these records. If there are blank values, in this case, I want them all to show as null. I don't want there to be any empty records in my data set. And so now you'll see that the system's dynamically updated all of those values here as well. So we just seen sort of how you can replace values. Another thing you can do, especially in these sort of inputs where you see that there's only sort of two gender fields, you can go in here and say, okay, let's spell these out, where if it is an M and it is case sensitive generally, you can put in the word male, and then for the F, we can replace it with female. Perfect. And you can do the same here with the married and single. You can hit replace values. Let's put in the M that's there before. And let's put in married. And then let's do the same for the single attribute. Another thing you can do, just another really quick tip here, you can do conditional columns. So these are let's use the organizational level as the example. So I know we've been doing some logic that's fairly straightforward. We could probably do the same thing here where we just replace the twos, but maybe we want to keep those numerical values there and we want to call it organizational level name. And we can say, okay, if the organizational level equals 2, then it is senior. If the organizational level equals 3, it is executive. And for all other values that are here, so you could say else, if there's any other value there, just put standard employee. So then you can kind of give those numerical values names. So there's only 2 here in this case. So because of that, you can see that there's only the executive and senior. But if we go over here to the organizational level, well, I was going to change a value or 2 here. Let's go ahead and do that directly inside of the CSV file. So let's go back into the employee file and let's just change a handful of those to 1s. So I've changed just a handful of those values to 1s. We'll hit the save button. We'll get out of that file so that the system knows that we've kind of left. And we'll go to home and we'll go ahead and we'll just refresh the preview. So we're making these changes live in these files, but pretend like they're already there for the sake of the session. All right, so then we'll go back to our conditional column and you'll see now we have a handful of standard employees inputted into this file. So it shows you how you can use conditional columns to create that maybe formatting that you're missing or you want to add into your report. All right, so we've kind of looked here at the first level of input, which is column quality. I'm going to remove that now and I'm going to go into column distribution. So in this example here, we'll look at multiple. You'll see that in this example, we've got 17 distinct and unique values. Right, so that basically means that this employee ID, which would make sense, it's a unique identifier for this employee, and so it should be unique to them, and so it's a very unique field. If there were duplicates there, we'd be concerned just because of the fact it is their personal employee ID, and this is an employee-based table. The very next record here is the manager ID. So an employee could have, multiple employees could have the same manager. So it does make sense that there are 4 distinct records here and only 1 that's unique. So that means that someone as a manager only has one employee that reports into them. So they're only displaying on screen 1 time. In that case, it's the 285 record here. From what I can tell, it only displays once. So it is unique. It's because that manager only has 1 employee that shows up in this list. So that does make sense. There would be, definitely would be some duplicate records for the manager ID, and I think everyone can feel comfortable with that. There can be and will be some cases where, first or last name may not be unique or distinct. In this case, it is, but there could be some times where there could be multiple Johns or Jillians or Sarahs, and so that could be the case. So it's just giving you sort of the distribution of the column, sort of the makeup of it, so that you as a user can go in here and kind of look at your data and see if it's set up the correct way. You as sort of the owner of your data will definitely be very familiar with it, and this is a really good place for you to come and look for any possible issues or opportunities for you to go through and do some data cleansing before you start doing your reporting. All right, so that's one example there, and you can do that across the board, right? So for sales order ID, maybe you don't want to see duplicates. Often seeing duplicates in an ID is okay because that order could have multiple inputs. But it looks like on the sales order detail ID, sort of a secondary to this, it is fully unique. So just another sort of example. In any cases where you don't like that there are duplicate records, so let's just say on the customer table, for example, if you've seen a person's first and last name display more than one time, you may be concerned with that, right? You may not want James to show up here twice. And so if you've seen any duplicates here, there aren't any in this case, you could hit this remove duplicates icon and it will automatically remove those records for you. So just some really, so I like to call it cool features inside of Power Query that allow you the ability to kind of make changes on the fly and clean your data up if there are issues that you've identified based on your kind of previewing some of these data preview items. So this was the column distribution section. The final section we'll go over as we kind of close out this is the column profile. So think of it as a way to look at just some of the column quality and distribution and other inputs all in one place. So you can really get, I like to call it a very succinct view at what your data looks like in a particular column. So let's go and look at just the line total amounts. Really good place to probably look. So there's 1,000 records here that we're looking at. There are 105 distinct attributes, which does make sense too. Line totals could very well be the exact same if folks are ordering the exact same items, if there's something super popular. It'll show you the unique items. You'll see a min and a max. So this is showing you the line totals. So you can see what the minimum line total amount is and what the maximum line total amount is, as well as what the average and the standard deviation for that item is as well. And you can see that it kind of gives you a distribution of that here on screen where you can kind of see, how the numbers kind of shake out across this entire sort of data set. So I think this is another sort of really great way to kind of view and look at your data. Customer ID, another example here. You would expect that there would be some items here that are not unique from a customer ID standpoint. It looks like some of these orders could be sort of over time and certain sort of products that they purchased as well. So you can see here that maybe an individual made an order and purchased multiple products and maybe different quantities associated with those products as well. And so you will be able to see that, hey, that customer's made, it would make sense that maybe a customer's made multiple purchases or has multiple transactions under this table. And so just kind of looking at this and saying, okay, does the data make sense? Does it seem relatively on par? Things like that. Maybe a couple of other just really quick things that you could do with this data that might be super helpful. If you look at the employee ID table here, this is basically a list of all the employees within sort of this database. And then here you can see the orders that are here. And so each of these orders are also assigned to an employee ID as well. If you wanted to bring the employee's information into this file, you can do that as well here inside of Power Query. You would just simply merge the data. If you're familiar with SQL at all, it's almost like just joins, right? Left joins, right joins. So inside of Power BI, it works very similar. You can say, hey, here's my entire orders table. I want you to go out and grab me the employee details. So in most cases, you may want just their first and last name and maybe a few other relevant endpoints. For this one, we do left outer. We want all the rows from the first table to be displayed as they already are, and bring in all the inputs from the second table that are matching. So if 279 is in the employee table, bring back that data input. So if you see 279, grab all the input for 279 and bring it back into the orders table is basically what you're saying. So if I go here, I probably never would want to see the employee ID number more than once unless you're trying to gut check your data. And if you are trying to gut check your data, then it's perfectly fine to bring it in. I'm going to go ahead and do that so we can just look at it side by side. Generally, I would exclude it because I know that it's going to do the mapping correctly. But in the event that you want to kind of just do a quick gut check on your data, you can bring in the employee ID from the employees table. You will know it's the employees table because I left basically the employee prefix in as I was loading this data. I thought that would be the best way to sort of do the integration. All right, so I'm expanding the entire table here, and the fastest way for you to check to see if it's working is to look at the employee ID from the actual base table, which is here. I know that because the employee ID here is only titled employee ID. And then over here, we've got the employees table. And so you can see here what that is. So it's 279 too. So basically, we pulled in all the input from the employee table into the order table so that we can do some analytics that will show us, basically you look at region or country or territory and start to look at sort of sales at the individual employee level as well as at a region or territory-based level as well. All right, I hope this content was helpful for you. Again, we went through a few very key items here. We went through the column quality, which again would tell you if there are any valid or, what the percentage of valid records are, any errors or empty records that need to be modified within your data set so that you can clean those up. We went through the column distribution, which is going to show you if there are unique records, duplicate records, what's the makeup of those records from like a unique and a distinct standpoint. In the event that something like the employee table has duplicate records when it shouldn't, it'll give you the opportunity to remove any duplicates or records that you want to get rid of, just to make sure your data is clean and accurate for when you do your reporting. And then again, column profile really takes, I like to call it, fully integrates the column quality and the column distribution and gives you a really good, robust view at what your data looks like for each of the individual tables so that you, as sort of the data expert, can then come in and say, all right, does this look good? Is there something clearly wrong that I need to, investigate further? But it really gives you sort of a deeper preview into your actual data set. On top of that, we did go through a couple of additional steps where we basically joined two tables. So we brought in the employee records into the order table so that we could see that side by side and together. The other thing we did was a couple of Power Query steps where we did some conditional logic and replacing values. So if we had empty values in our data set, we could automatically replace those with null or some other attribute that we find relevant. We did, change names from M to male just to spell out that gender name in full. Same for marital status to spell that name out in full. And then we did some conditional logic here to show, hey, if we've got a column attribute that we want to keep and we want to apply some if-then logic, we can do that with an additional conditional column inside of Power Query. So I know we kind of went through quite a bit of details there. Hopefully it was helpful for you. If you have any questions, please drop it in the comments section. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Give us some feedback. If there's content that you want to go over or hear about, feel free to let us know. We're excited and happy to kind of create our content to align with what you guys are having issues with or want to learn more about. Appreciate the time, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode with the Bix team.